we take the time to pause, step back, and observe our world, it can become obvious that there are a lot of things that are in need of change. Many of these topics, like inflation, energy prices, higher taxes, and the evils of secular ideologues, stare at us as monsters, and they growl every day. We grumble about the gas prices. We grumble about the cost of food. We seem to collectively grumble about a whole lot in our lives. And we do it all reactively, too, it seems. So let us suggest that we are right where we should be, based upon our actions. You see, what we think is what we do. If we convince ourselves that we are defenseless, then what are we? We're victims. If we convince ourselves that we're insignificant, well, then we're meek. If we convince ourselves that we're only one person and never do anything because we're just one person, well, then nothing has ever changed because we are followers. Like my father has always said, can't never did a thing. What is the difference between a follower and a leader then? A leader says I can. A follower says I can't. A leader says we can do and does, and a follower goes along with the crowd. So who are you? And why do we ask that? Well, we ask because it begins with you and me, the individual. So please strap yourself in and hang on as we take a look at the power of one as we venture down the rabbit hole one more time. I sat in a big box, if you will, parking lot with a former Marine and law enforcement officer, a friend waiting for our buddy to return from his shopping expedition. I used to spend my money with this big box store because of their charitable giving choices, so I decided to sit in the car. You see, it weighs on me that companies would spend my money to support causes that I don't foundationally agree with. So they don't get my money anymore. It's that simple. Anyway, as we watched the steady flow of the eager spenders come and go, we discussed how we no longer recognize America and our role in the world. We agreed that what we see and hear is no longer the America that we've known. It seemed distant and alien in nature. People seemed beaten. We pondered what had created this paradigm shift and the moral quagmire we're in as a country. What else did we have to do while we're waiting for our friend to return from his shopping? And after considerable consideration, I'm wondering if it may be nothing more than apathy onset by progressivism. Apathy is a lack of feeling or emotion, interests or concerns. Apathy is a state of indifference or the suppression of emotions such as concern, excitement, motivation, and or passion. An apathetic individual has an absence of interest in or concern about emotional, social, spiritual, philosophical, or physical life and the world? Yikes! The ingredients that foment, start, nurture, brew the onset of widespread political and moral apathy are varied. Some are the constant attacks on our sensibility, political correctness, propaganda, but moral apathy is often the result of civic and social systems actively obstructing principled engagement and involvement in the same. What I mean is, this obstruction creates a debilitating sense of defeat. It manifests itself in an acute awareness of cultural darkness. Oh boy, these and other efforts may very well have created a survival state of apathetic disconnect in Americans. In other words, our give a damn is broke. The greater our civic apathy as a nation, the weaker we are actually. And when we live in indifference or we give way to suppression of our emotions such as concern, excitement, motivation, and or passion, we're less able to base decisions on common principle. That's a key right there. Common principle. You see, people by their nature often care, and apathy does not make us stupid. On the contrary, a great deal of energy is used to offset the world and hibernate in an apathetic state of existence. Apathy requires an acute awareness of the obvious. It is what drives some to have a broken give a damn. Many can only cope with the influence of the pressure of reality by excusing themselves from it and gathering in flocks for comfort. They yearn for a sheepdog. Is it truth that drives the apathetic to denial? Whatever the cause, be it a moral defeat or a plain lack of concern, apathy is easily overcome. All it takes is for a person to be honest with themselves and then act according to the principles they adhere to. We just need to give a damn. When one stands on a foundation of principle, then there's hope. When a second stands, then there's presence. When a third and a fourth stand, there are numbers. Apathy is an outcome, not a cause. To detach the civilly apathetic from their flock, you don't need a government, you don't need activist groups or groups of organizers, causes, or beliefs. It doesn't require a president or a preacher. There just needs to be a reversal of this progressive agenda, because this will ultimately force us to a place of honesty in our differences. Pray now that we're ready for the outcome and America grows stronger, because the newly awakened may take some time to regain a principled state of integrity. You see, we don't need to stand as an organized body of politics, culture, race, or social status. We need to stand as individuals, determined to exercise and preserve our rights of natural existence. We need to stand as an American. This is step one, the individual, you and I. And sometimes it takes the darkness for us to see the light. So stand an example. Be the individual. Be honest with yourself. Then stand for your principles, whether they're the same as mine or not. But be self-honest in the process. Refuse to impugn your integrity. The rest will follow for us all. You'll resonate indeed by standing for the common constitutional principles we all have claim to, and if not, we'll hang on, unfortunately. May God let us be the light in the darkness and project honor for others to see. Let us rally as Americans. It's our nature, not our law, that makes us who we are, and it's our nature, not our government, that is true. It is our nature and not the politicians that make it work. You see, no one raindrop is responsible for the flood, yet it's the rain that creates the flood. Nor has one voice been responsible for a whole revolution of ideas. We must, as free men, act as a drop of rain so that we may collectively flood our world with love, freedom, and God's will. Time is running out. Who will you be? As an individual that's given certain immutable rights as provided by my Creator, I'm free to make decisions and choices that govern my life. As I make these decisions and spawn an outcome through my action, I must remain mindful of the fact that actions' outcomes hold consequences. That is generally why we take action, though, to get results, to have a consequence. I chop down a tree to get more sun. I plant a tree to get more shade. So when we do take action, let us be mindful of a couple of things. If our outcome harms our neighbor or takes from their prosperity, then my action is not moral or ethical. It becomes in direct opposition to the path of my Creator that gave me these inalienable rights. The same path as a mere mortal try and walk every day of my life, not always in the best manner, but I am human. This is where rules rules come into play. Even if you were the only person on the planet, you'd still need rules. Rules like water is wet and fire is hot. There are certain facts that are universal in nature, and if not accepted, well, they're going to cause angst and some friction attempting to subvert them. As a human race, we've created sets of rules that we all are to follow. The idea being that as long as we all do what is right by ourselves and our neighbors, then we may exist in a peaceful and free society. There's a lot more to say about rules, and we'll go more in depth on this subject further on in the series. But for now, let's take a look and see who gets to decide the rules then. Well, in most sovereign country, the rules are made by the leaders. How these leaders get to their positions they hold is different and varied in every nation, but the idea is the same. In some country, we call them rulers, and others lawmakers, some kings and others queens, but in America, the title is a legislator, one who legislates the law or puts forward the rule. Now, making rule of law off the cuff can be a mess. Let's look at it this way. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, that there are two sides to an issue that are represented by two different lawmakers. Happens every day. They're attempting to make a law, a rule that you and I have to follow. Should this law be fair to all or just fair to some? This is where principles come into play. We as humans have to have a way to balance our ideas for rule. We must agree on a platform of these principles and our ideals so that when we have two different ideas, we need to make sure that either or both that are brought forward meet these foundational principles that we all share. The first of those principles is that we're all created equal and have the same opportunity to pick our big butts up off the couch and go do something in life in order to pursue what makes us happy in our world. In America, we define this in our Constitution, our goal, our charter. The lofty goals of the United States Constitution are really hard to meet. They're tough because of the difficulty that it takes to execute them, to be responsible for more and more efforts towards that upwards climb. These actions and their outcomes, when they adhere to our agreed upon mission, make us all equally stronger as individuals. You see, when we, the people, now regain control over the variable of outside influence and reverse the flow of the corruption in the process, we will have begun the restoration of our communities and America. And that is our job as the people. At that point of unity, we will once again stand united. Unity is defined in the dictionary as the quality or the state of not being multiple, a oneness. Our national culture, though, has become fractionalized by a series of divisions purposefully crafted over a period of time for the partisan gain of political wings and special interest. Political party structures have damaged their brand and chased off a large number of their members. And over time, internal party factions have strengthened, become more independent of each other, and today barely maintain a semblance of cohesion as a political party. This trend has become dangerous and a threat to the success of our republic. It cannot be allowed to continue. We have the responsibility as citizens to bring factions together for reconciliation through a process of responsible reform. A sign of our success will be evident in the voice of those that are opposing you. When they call you divisive, continue to speak. When they demand unity, remind them that unity does not come without mutual reconciliation. In that process of reconciliation, remember to stand true to principles and values. There is no reconciliation of truth, only capitulation when it is surrendered. It is that same stand for principle that has brought us to a point in which we are today. You must stand for strong universal principles and American values if you wish for the prosperity of this nation to go forward. Let us all gather and declare our principles so that we may be seen. Then demand just governance from those that claim your brand and benefit from your effort. Stand for principle. Stand for honest government. Stand for those of like mind and develop a platform of principle which we can agree upon as free men. To not do so is negligent. To not do so relinquishes the Republic of the United States of America to governance by influence and not will. So, what are these principles that we've already declared we all agree on? Those who are familiar with the principles of liberty are acquainted with the claim that these are the principles upon which the founders based our new government, thereby assuring us of lasting peace, prosperity, and freedom. Occasionally, the question is asked, where can we find these principles in our founding documents? And hopefully, what's to follow will help you make that connection. First, however, one point needs to be made clear. There is a notion today that the Declaration of Independence is not really a part of American jurisprudence, and that the principles contained therein cannot be referred to as a basis of American law. Sad, really. This line of thought is usually concluded by saying that if a principle cannot be found in the Constitution, such as a belief in a creator, it's not part of the American culture or law. This idea is blatantly false. The Declaration of Independence has been repeatedly cited by the Supreme Court as part of the fundamental law of the United States of America. The following, then, are some of the ways in which the principles of liberty were emphasized as the founders structured our government. Principle number one. The only reliable basis for sound government and just human relations is natural law. Natural law was defined as the order in which the Creator made everything work properly. There are certain laws which govern the entire universe, and just as Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, there are laws which govern in the affairs of men which are the laws of nature and of nature's God. If governments and human relationships are formed according to these laws, they will succeed. If not, they will surely fail, as history has proven. This comes from the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Now, principle number two, a free people cannot survive under a republican constitution unless they remain virtuous and morally strong. The founders knew they could not succeed in this political building without the support of the supreme judge of the world and without a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. They knew this would not happen unless they kept his commandments, which amounted to being virtuous and morally strong. This is derived from the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Principle number three, the most promising method of securing a virtuous and morally stable people is to elect virtuous leaders. No greater case can be made of the damage done to a free people by power-hungry and tyrannical leaders than the long list of abuses Thomas Jefferson listed in the Declaration. While directed at King George, these abuses are typically of leaders who are without virtue and morality. The list of grievances is again in the Declaration of Independence. Principle number four, without religion, the government of a free people cannot be maintained. As in principle two, the founders knew they could not succeed in this political building without the support of the supreme judge of the world and without a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. They believed they'd have his support and protection if they relied on him, constantly kept his laws, and taught their children to do likewise. This comes from the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Principle number five, all things were created by God. Therefore, upon him all mankind are equally dependent, and to him they are equally responsible. The founders considered the existence of the Creator as the most fundamental premise underlying all self-evident truth. The words nature's God, Creator, created supreme judge of the universe, and divine providence are used throughout the Declaration of Independence. Principle number 6, all men are created equal. Now, that's an exact quote from the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Principle number 7, the proper role of government is to protect equal rights, not provide equal things. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Principle 8, men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Principle 9, to protect man's rights, God has revealed certain principles of divine law. The founders knew that God had revealed certain laws for human happiness, such as laws against killing, stealing, adultery, lying, coveting, etc. These are reflected in the right of man to form a government to protect his unalienable rights of life, of his liberty, and his property. That is outlined in the Declaration and the Bill of Rights. Paragraph 10, the God-given right to govern is vested in the sovereign authority of the whole people. The last paragraph of the Declaration makes it clear that the people as a whole, by their representatives in Congress, have complete authority from the Supreme Judge of the universe to govern themselves in every way and to take their rightful place among the sovereign people of earth. Principle 11, the majority of the people may alter or abolish a government which has become tyrannical. The second paragraph of the Declaration makes it clear that the people have a God-given right to throw off dictators and establish a government that will better protect them in their rights. Principle number 12, the United States of America shall be a republic. Article 1.2.1 of the Constitution sets forth the provisions that give the American people the right to vote for their own representatives, thereby making the United States a constitutional republic of the people, not a democracy. Principle 13, a constitution should be structured to permanently protect the people from the human frailties of their rulers. In forming our government on the basis of natural law, the founders dealt directly with the human nature characteristic that power almost always corrupts. The separation of powers, the checks and balances, and limited governmental powers in the Constitution were all methods employed to check the human frailties which result in a runaway power. That is why the Constitution will never be obsolete or outdated. Principle 14. Life and liberty are secure only so long as the right of our property is secure. The Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights specifically prohibits the federal government from taking private property of the people for public use without just compensation. It is a recognition of the sacred right to property and that property is really an extension of one's life and their liberty. Principle number 15. The highest level of prosperity occurs when there is a free market economy and a minimum of government regulations. Other than setting up a proper monetary system and ensuring the free flow of commerce between the states, there is no power given to Congress to regulate economic affairs of the people. It is a manifest intent to keep the federal government completely out of the free market economy and to leave any needed regulations to the states themselves, where they're closer to home. Ask yourself, is that taking place now? Principle 16. The government should be separated into three branches. There should be a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch. Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution create this beautiful separation of the powers to prevent the tyranny of a consolidated government. There should be a number 4, the deep state. Principle 17. A system of checks and balances should be adopted to prevent the abuse of power. This constitutional system of pitting human nature against human nature by checking each other's power is pure genius. Principle 18. The unalienable rights of the people are most likely to be preserved if the principles of the government are set forth in a written constitution. The 200 and so nations on the earth today, about 125 of them have written constitutions. However, ours is the oldest one. One of the youngest nations has the oldest written constitution. The founders were the first in modern times to realize that the best way to preserve good government and rights of the people is to write them down. Principle 19, only limited and carefully defined powers should be delegated to government, all others being retained in the people. Article 1.8 contains the 20 powers delegated to Congress. Article 2 contains the 6 areas of responsibility of the president, and Article 3 contains the 11 kinds of cases assigned to the federal court. The 10th Amendment reminds us that all other powers are reserved to the states and the people. Timely. Principle 20. Efficiency and dispatch require government to operate according to the will of the majority, but constitutional provisions must be made to protect the rights of the minority. Article 6 declares the Constitution to be the supreme law of the land. If a law is passed which violates the rights of the people, it can be declared null and void by the guardians of the Constitution. All right, Principle 21. Strong local self-government is the keystone to preserving human freedom. The 10th Amendment leaves most power to govern with the states and local governments. This is where freedom really manifests itself. Principle 22. A free people should be governed by law and not by the whims of men. Sound familiar? The people reserve the right in Article 1.1.1 not to be governed by any law not passed by their representatives. Article 3 gives the power to the judiciary to prevent a citizen from being prosecuted by an unjust law which violates the unalienable rights of the people, as demonstrated by our Supreme Court rolling back the recent EPA rulings. Principle 23. A free society cannot survive as a republic without a broad program of general education. The reaction of King George to the list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence is an example of why tyrants want to keep the people ignorant of their actions. In order to preserve and encourage the sacred right of the people to gain knowledge, the Constitution forbids the federal government from involving itself in the education of the people. It leaves the responsibility to the states and the people where it can be locally controlled. Again, in the 10th Amendment. And Principle 24, we're almost there, kids. A free people will not survive unless they stay strong. Article 1.8 gives Congress the power to maintain a military. Principle 25, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. No authority can be found in the Constitution for the United States to tie its sovereignty to any other nation or to give the people's money to foreign rulers, NATO, the UN, all other kinds of organizations, and let's talk about Ukraine. Principle 26, the core unit which determines the strength of any society is the family. Therefore, the government should foster and protect its integrity. No authority can be found in the Constitution to involve the federal government in family affairs. The founders knew any laws dealing with these kinds of sensitive issues must be kept close to the people, thereby best preserving this most sacred institution, the family. Principle 27. The burden of debt is as destructive to freedom as subjugation by conquest. Article 1.8 lists to pay the debts as the first use of public funds. The founders considered it immoral to pass debts on to the next generation. Principle 28, and this is the last of the list of principles that we'll be reading for the day. The United States has a manifest destiny to be an example and a blessing to the entire human race. The entire Constitution was intended to be such a model for the world of how a people can govern themselves and thereby enjoy an unlimited amount of freedom, prosperity, and peace. Our greatest export was supposed to be freedom.